The Suleiman Desert doesn't forgive mistakes. It swallows them, buries them beneath its molten sand and sun-scorched silence. That morning, the air shimmered with heat waves even before the sun rose fully over the ridge. I was under the chassis of Falcon 88, tightening the last bolt on the turbine mount when the first shell hit. I didn't flinch. 20-hour shifts harden your reflexes like that. You just learn to move fast. I scrambled out from under the Apache as the hangar shook and alarms began howling. That's when the second shell landed, closer this time. Too precise to be random. We were under direct assault. "Falcon crew, report," someone shouted. I knew immediately, this wasn't some warning shot. This was it. The base was Kandarak Outpost, a forward operations site tucked into the hills near the southern edge of the conflict zone. Officially, I was Chief Technician Maya El-Amin, ground crew for rotary assault. Unofficially, the grease-stained woman no one noticed until a chopper failed to start. 33 years old, barely 5 feet tall, built more for elbow-deep engine bays than battle. My call sign used to be Patch, until that day. A sharp voice cracked through the base loudspeakers. "Any available Apache pilots, report immediately. We need air cover on Grid Delta 2. That was Lieutenant Colonel Darrow. His voice didn't rise unless things were spiraling. No one responded, because no one could. Our pilots were either airborne, shot down, or scattered across the base trying to survive. I stood in the middle of the hangar floor, surrounded by silence, smoke, and a lot of scared eyes. That's when I heard myself say it out loud. I can fly it. Every wrench, every tool, every breath in that hangar paused. I didn't say it for effect. It just came out like muscle memory. Like a truth I'd buried under a decade of regret. One of the mechanics, a new guy named Greer, snorted. "You? Your ground crew, El-Amin." I turned toward him. "I rebuilt that bird. Swapped the entire fuel delivery system last week. Calibrated her targeting suite yesterday. If anyone here knows how she ticks, it's me. Knowing how she ticks ain't flying, Chief." He was right. I wasn't certified. Never had been. But I knew that helicopter better than anyone alive. And I'd been flying it for years in silence. Not in the sky. Not with a flight crew. But in an old broken simulator stored behind Bay 3, where no one ever went anymore. That simulator had been my second home for 6 years. Every night shift I could steal, I'd run mission profiles, fail them, try again, run full startup sequences, emergency drills. I trained myself in the dark when the rest of the base was asleep, because I needed to believe there was still a chance. A chance that maybe, one day, I could be more than the one who fixed what others broke. When I was 17, I passed the Air Force's written flight test with one of the highest scores in my class. But the dream ended at the vision screening. I was a quarter diopter short in my right eye. Just enough to disqualify me from flight school. They stamped my papers with red ink like I was a defective product. That day, I walked out of the testing facility and never looked back, at least not in public. Privately, I built a new dream. If I couldn't fly their machines, I'd learn every single nut, wire, and algorithm inside them. By 22, I was stationed in Germany as an avionics specialist. By 28, I was chief mechanic for Apaches at Kandarak. I carried wrenches, not wings, but in my locker, I kept a folded photograph of my mother. She flew reconnaissance birds in Operation Scorched Sky, a legend in her own right. Died when I was 10. Her face still watches me from that photo. Eyes sharp under a flight helmet, a half smile that looks like she knows a secret no one else does. She used to say, "The sky is where truth lives. Up there, nobody pretends." Maybe that's why I started sneaking into the simulator room when no one was looking. The system was ancient, early 2000s era, full of glitches and held together by stubbornness and luck. But I coaxed life back into it. Recalibrated the inputs, patched in newer flight modules I borrowed from storage. And then, when the base went dark and the only sound was the desert wind howling through the exhaust vents, I flew. I flew like it mattered. The simulations became my rituals. My confessions. I practiced emergency power failures. Tail rotor loss. Full instrument blackout. I wrote my own drills and reran them until I could recite every checklist backwards. Every time I powered that sim down, I'd whisper the same thing to the empty room. "For you, Ma. I'm not done yet." But none of that mattered when I stepped forward in that hangar and said I could fly. Colonel Darrow turned toward me, his face streaked with dust, his radio crackling. "You have flight hours on record, Chief?" No, sir. Certification? No, sir. He didn't blink. What do you have? I swallowed hard. 1,800 hours of maintenance. 6 years of unrecorded simulator flights. And a hangar full of witnesses who know I built that aircraft bolt by bolt. I could see the battle behind his eyes. Regulations. Consequences. Risk. But then he said something I'll never forget. Does she fly true? She flies like she's alive, I said. She's ready. The base shook again. A mortar slammed into the east wall. Smoke curled up over the rooftops, and someone screamed outside. He didn't hesitate after that. You've got one shot, Chief El-Amin. You wreck that bird. You answer to command. But if you pull this off, call sign's yours. He paused. Ember One. Ember. The last spark. The one that refuses to go out. I ran. Up the side wing. Into the cockpit. Slid the canopy down. My gloves were still damp with engine grease. My heart pounded so hard I thought I might black out. I flipped the battery master switch. The screen lit up. The turbine spooled with that low whine I'd heard 1,000 times during testing. But this time, it was alive in my hands. From my flight suit pocket, I pulled out the photograph. I taped it to the left side of the instrument panel, right under the targeting display. For you, Ma. And then I spoke into the mic. Kandarak Control, this is Ember One. Spooling up. Silence answered at first. Then, a shocked voice replied. Confirmed. Ember One, cleared for combat departure. The rotors came to life like a rising storm. First slow, then faster, until they blurred into a single disk of whirling steel. The hangar lights flickered. Dust lifted off the floor like ghosts being stirred awake. Every eye in that hangar was on me now. Mechanics frozen mid-step. Engineers holding their breath. Soldiers outside glancing back over their shoulders at the one bird still intact. A ground tech with wide eyes whispered, "She's really doing it." I was. No turning back now. The vibrations in the seat were deeper than the simulator ever prepared me for. This machine growled like it had something to prove. I checked every gauge, every pressure value. All systems read green. The weapons bay was locked and hot. 30mm chain gun loaded, Hydra rockets primed, Hellfire standing by. I eased the collective up. The Apache groaned, lifted once, bounced slightly as the skids released from the dirt, then floated. Just like I'd imagined. The weight, the balance, it was all muscle memory now. I adjusted cyclic forward and began climbing through the haze of smoke that choked the eastern side of the base. Ember One, we've got eyes. Came Colonel Darrow's voice over comms. Proceed to grid Delta 2. Friendlies are pinned down. You're their only cover. My only answer was a steady, copy, en route. Outside, Kandarak shrank beneath me. A base made of concrete, steel, and desperate hope. I passed over the remnants of the fuel depot, still smoldering, and the twisted wreckage of the other Apaches that didn't get off the ground. I saw soldiers waving. Some just stared, but I didn't wave back. There were 46 of ours pinned down in a canyon 2 clicks northeast. The terrain was rocky and jagged, a natural kill zone. Whoever launched this attack knew what they were doing. They'd funneled our people into a trench and were picking them off from both flanks. I didn't have the altitude for detailed recon, but I didn't need it. The targeting suite hummed as I locked in on movement just ahead. For technicals, 2 transports, 1 anti-air flatbed, spread across the canyon mouth. All enemy. I toggled to Hydra 70s. Target locked? I whispered, more to myself than the radio. I hesitated a breath. Sim was one thing. This was live fire. I could still turn back. Still land. Let someone with actual credentials finish what I? No, not this time. I squeezed the trigger. The rocket spiraled forward and detonated against the first technical with a bloom of orange fire. Shrapnel and sand erupted skyward. I veered right, flared the tail, and loosed a second rocket into the transport truck behind it. Then chaos broke loose. Enemy guns opened up. Tracers cut through the sky like angry threads. Below, friendly forces scattered, using the distraction to reposition. I saw flashes of helmets, wounded soldiers crawling for cover, others firing back from makeshift barricades of stone. Ember One, direct hit, came Darrow's voice. Repeat, confirmed hits on enemy position. Keep them busy. Our people are moving. Adrenaline surged, but I kept my voice level. Engaging. I banked hard, flared again, and toggled the chain gun. The 30mm spat death with a rhythmic staccato that echoed off the cliffs. I raked the enemy ridge, watching bodies dive for cover. Then came the scream. Missile lock. The warning tone in my headset shrieked. My hands moved faster than I could think. I dropped flares, twisted the bird into a violent dive, hugging the cliffside. A second later, the missile streaked by, chasing heat and smoke into empty air. The Apache bucked. The tail rotor howled. Not good. I scanned the diagnostics. A warning blinked red. Rear assembly torque imbalance. Tail rotor bearing was damaged. Shrapnel must have caught it during the dive. I had maybe 10 minutes of stable flight left. Tops. I toggled the comms. Kandarak, this is Ember One. Bird's injured but airborne. I can finish this run. Negative, Ember One. That's an order. RTB immediately. My eyes flicked to the photo taped beside the altimeter. My mother's smile, forever locked in black and white. I pressed transmit. Can't do that, sir. Not yet. And I pulled the Apache into a final loop over the canyon, ready to finish what I started. I'd felt fear before, real fear. The kind that twists in your gut when a wrench slips and you hear something crack inside a turbine you just signed off on. The kind that creeps in during those 0-300 hours when you're the only soul left awake in a hangar full of broken aircraft, and the only thing louder than the silence is the doubt in your own mind. But flying into a battlefield with a failing tail rotor? That was new. The bird bucked again. The vibration in the pedals told me everything I needed to know. I was running out of time. The bearings were grinding themselves to dust. Below, enemy vehicles scrambled. One of the remaining technicals attempted to retreat behind a ridge outcropping, but it was too late. I tagged it with a laser and launched a hellfire. The explosion ripped through the air like thunder, clean, direct. I rolled left, staying low to the rock formations as more tracer fire chased me. I could feel it now, the fatigue in the frame, the slippage in control response. I didn't have much longer before the tail failed entirely, and I still had one last cluster of hostiles to break. I spotted them tucked behind an overturned troop carrier, maybe a dozen men, one RPG team loading fast. I toggled to the chain gun, held my breath, and squeezed the trigger in short bursts. Rounds tore through the sand and metal alike. The RPG launcher exploded in a fiery arc. Others scrambled, one of them grabbing a wounded comrade and vanishing into the rocks. Then the comms came alive. Ember One, enemy forces are retreating. I repeat, retreating. You've broken their line. Friendly units are on the move. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Relief. But it didn't last. The tail rotor warning began to flash. This time, not amber, but red. Critical failure imminent. I scanned the landscape. Flat enough for a hard landing? No. Open road? Nothing. Only one option left. Get the bird back to base. I swung her around toward Kandarak, the Apache groaning beneath me like a tired beast begging to rest. The desert stretched wide and endless ahead. Smoke plumes dotted the horizon. I pushed the collective, coaxing every ounce of lift I could without losing balance. Every mile closer, the vibrations worsened. At 5 clicks out, the pedals went soft. No more feedback. The tail was going. I radioed in. Kandarak, Ember One returning. Tail rotor compromised. Request emergency clearance. Copy, Ember. Clear runway. We've got visual. Bring her home. Bring her home. I gritted my teeth, adjusted the pitch manually, and leaned on the stick like it was the only thing holding me upright. The base rose into view. People, dozens of them, lined the edge of the tarmac, staring up at the smoke-trailing Apache limping in from the northeast. I dropped altitude slow and steady, praying the tail didn't give out completely. I wasn't aiming for grace, just survival. The landing skids hit the dirt hard. Once, twice, bounce. Then the full weight of the bird slammed down, buckled slightly, but held. Dust exploded around me. The rotors began their slow, grinding stop. And then there was silence. I just sat there for a minute, shaking, my hands still clutched to the controls. Alive. Whole. The cockpit stank of sweat, fuel, and burning ozone. I reached out, gently peeled the photo from the panel, folded it in half, and tucked it back into my pocket. Thanks, Ma, I whispered. We made it. Then I opened the canopy and climbed out. The moment my boots hit the dirt, my knees nearly buckled. My legs didn't know whether to collapse or keep running. I tore off the helmet, soaked with sweat and grime, and sucked in the heavy, dusty air like it might anchor me back to earth. The hangar crew had already spilled out onto the tarmac. So had soldiers, medics, even the base cooks. The whole outpost must have seen me limping in, trailing smoke like a comet. For a second, nobody moved. Just silence. Then someone shouted, "Ember One," and the rest followed like floodgates breaking. Cheers erupted, raw, thunderous, disbelieving. Mechanics who'd shared late-night meals with me slapped my shoulders. A young infantryman pressed both hands to his helmet like he couldn't believe I was real. Somewhere in the crowd, I heard my name chanted. Over and over. Maya. Ember One. Maya. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I think I was too wrung out to feel anything yet. Then I saw Colonel Darrow pushing through the wall of bodies, expression carved from stone. When he reached me, the crowd fell quiet. He looked me over, scorch marks on my sleeves, a tear in my flight suit, black smudges up to my elbows. I stood tall, even as my heart thudded so hard I thought he could hear it. "You disobeyed a direct order to return," he said, voice low, sharp as a blade. "I know, sir. You stole a combat aircraft without clearance." "Yes, sir. You engaged enemy forces without authorization." I met his eyes. "And I saved 46 lives, sir." The silence between us stretched like taut wire. Then he raised his hand in a sharp salute. "And that," he said, "is the only reason you're still standing here." I returned the salute, chest tight. His voice rose just enough for the crowd to hear. "From this day forward, Chief Technician Maya El-Amin is recognized by this unit under the call sign Ember One." The cheer that followed wasn't just loud, it was deafening. I didn't know how to react. I'd never been anyone's hero before. I'd spent my life behind tool benches and under rotors, not in front of battle lines. But that day, for the first time, I felt like I belonged to something more. Something skybound. By nightfall, the celebration had faded into quiet murmurs and exhausted campfires. But for me, things were just getting started. I was called to the command tent not long after the rotors stopped spinning. Not for a handshake, not for a pat on the back, for an investigation. 2 officers in pressed uniforms waited behind a folding table. They didn't look impressed. One of them held a file so thick I wondered how many pages were in my service record. "Chief Technician El-Amin," the senior officer said, not unkindly. "You've created a situation." I nodded. They asked everything. Why did I take the aircraft? Had I been ordered? Who authorized it? Had I received informal flight training? Did someone help me? I answered each question with the same calm honesty I'd used all my life. "No, sir. I flew simulators alone. I kept it quiet. I didn't ask permission because there wasn't time to ask. I flew because someone had to. Because our people were dying. And because I believed I could do it." For 3 hours, they grilled me. When I told them about my mother, they raised eyebrows. When I mentioned the broken simulator behind Bay 3, one of them made a note. Then they showed me the helmet cam footage. My footage. I watched myself, breathing hard, whispering targeting commands, flipping switches with sure hands, banking through clouds of smoke and tracer fire. They paused it several times. "You handled a tail rotor failure mid-engagement," the officer said quietly. "That's something we train combat pilots for years to deal with. You just improvised?" "Maintenance gives you a feel for things, sir," I said. "The warning vibrations, there's a sound to it." I knew what was going. "And you stayed in the air anyway?" "Yes, sir." Silence followed. Then came the sentence I didn't expect. "You fly like you've done it before." I didn't know what to say. I wasn't a pilot. Not really. But I had become one. By the time I was dismissed, the weight of what I'd done started to settle in. I'd crossed a line. Not recklessly. Not for glory. But I had broken protocol, violated regulations, and commandeered a $50 million gunship in a combat zone. I should have been dishonorably discharged on the spot. Instead, I was told to wait. And hope. 2 weeks of silence followed. That's how long the official review took. During the day, I kept working, inspecting rotors, logging faults, signing off on repairs. But the eyes on me had changed. I wasn't just Chief El-Amin anymore. I was Ember One. People whispered the name when I passed. I wished they wouldn't. I hadn't asked for the spotlight. I hadn't asked to become the story. But the story had already outrun me. By the time the footage hit command at Central, it had already gone viral among ground crews. Word spread about the mechanic who flew, the tail rotor failure, the hellfire hits from an uncertified tech who was never supposed to be in a cockpit. The brass wasn't thrilled. On the 15th day, I was flown to HQ at Al Rayhan for a formal hearing. A colonel, a major, and a senior flight operations officer sat at the long table. No smiles. Just dossiers, cameras, and the hum of overhead lights. Colonel Farrows did the talking. Chief Technician Maya El-Amin, he began, voice steady. You disobeyed direct orders. Took control of an aircraft without proper clearance. Engaged hostile forces, all while knowingly unqualified for combat flight. I nodded once. Yes, sir. You also saved 46 soldiers, held the line for our outpost, and neutralized 6 enemy assets in under 10 minutes of unplanned combat engagement. Another nod. Yes, sir. He leaned forward. Do you regret what you did? I hesitated, then shook my head. No, sir. I regret that there was no one else. But not that I stepped up. The silence was long. No one scribbled notes anymore. They just looked at me. Then, finally, this board has determined that no disciplinary action will be taken. I blinked. Sir, Colonel Farrows continued, given the extreme circumstances, your actions are classified as necessary under emergency combat protocol. Furthermore, he opened a small case. You are hereby granted an honorary pilot designation, retroactive to the date of the Kandarak engagement. Your call sign, Ember One, will be officially entered into the record for 9th Combat Rotary Division. My breath caught. You won't be flying certified missions, but what you did will be remembered, Chief. He stood, dismissed. I stood, saluted, and turned to leave. But as I reached the door, he said one last thing. El-Amin, your mother would have been proud. That one hit like a rotor blade to the heart. I didn't say anything, just nodded once and stepped into the hall, where no one could see me clench my jaw to stop the tears. 6 months later, I found myself standing at the front of a classroom at the Joint Aviation Training Center outside Dharmara. Rows of fresh-faced mechanics sat before me, some barely out of boot camp, others with years under their belts. All of them had the same question behind their eyes. What's a tech like her doing teaching flight? I cleared my throat, nervous for the first time since that long flight over the canyon. I'm not a certified pilot, I told them. Still not. What I am is prepared. Some exchanged glances. A few looked skeptical. That was fine. I didn't come here to impress. I came to teach what I wished someone had taught me. This course, I continued, is for emergencies. It's for the day you look around and realize no one else can step up. You'll have 30 seconds to decide. Do I sit back and let others fall? Or do I move? I told them about Kandarak, about the simulator I'd rebuilt behind the hangar, about the hours no one saw, the self-doubt, the panic, and the stillness I found when my hands finally took the controls. I wasn't there to glorify rule-breaking. I told them the truth, that what I did should have gotten me court-martialed. But sometimes, manuals aren't enough. Sometimes, you fly not because you were told to, but because someone needs you to. I finished my talk with something I hadn't planned to say. Preparation isn't paperwork. It's heart. It's the hours you put in when no one's watching. And courage? It's stepping forward not because you're unafraid, but because it's not about you anymore. When class ended, most of them filed out in thoughtful silence. One lingered. A young woman, probably 20, stayed back. She had grease under her fingernails and a slight tremble in her voice. Chief El-Amin? Yes. How do you know you'll be enough when the moment comes? I gave her the only honest answer I had. You don't, but you try anyway. She nodded, then left. And I stood there for a long time, staring at the Apache simulator in the corner of the room, listening to the faint hum of its internal systems powering down. I stayed on at the center for a while, longer than I thought I would. I wasn't just an instructor. I was a reminder. The staff made that clear when they mounted a display in the hallway near the training hangar. At first, I resisted. I'm just a tech, I told them. But they didn't listen. They hung a framed photo of me beside the Apache I'd flown. Tail number 843, battered and grounded, but whole. I stood beside it in a flight suit that didn't belong to me, one hand resting on the stub wing, the same way my mother used to pose beside her birds. Beside the photo, under glass, sat 2 things. The first was a faded pilot badge, my mother's, tarnished and worn, still bearing her name, Captain D. El-Amin. The second was new, shining silver. It bore my name, Chief M. El-Amin. Call sign, Ember One. Below them, a brass plaque read. She fixed the bird, then flew it. I didn't ask for that line, but it stuck. Technicians and pilots walked past it every day. Some barely glanced. Others stopped. And every once in a while, I caught someone touching the glass, as if the story inside might rub off on them. I liked that, because that was the point. This wasn't about heroism. It wasn't about guts or glory or some dramatic moment in a cockpit. It was about knowing your craft so well, down to the bolt, the hum, the rhythm, that when the world breaks apart, you're the one who can hold it together. That's what I tried to teach. One night, long after curfew, I walked into the hangar alone. The simulator sat in darkness. I powered it on. The old interface booted with a flicker. And then, like so many nights before, I slid into the seat, wrapped my fingers around the cyclic, and whispered to the empty space. We're still flying, Ma. The whine of turbines filled the silent room. The desert wind doesn't forget. It carries the scent of fuel and fire, whispers of names shouted in chaos, and the weight of promises made in silence. At Kandarak, that wind still blows through the hangars, sweeping dust across the concrete and rattling loose bolts like bones in a jar. Every time I visit, it feels like coming home. I never asked for medals. Never got any, either. What I did wasn't policy, it was necessity. That's what the report says. Unorthodox engagement. Extraordinary outcome. Pilot status, honorary. 3 lines to summarize the day that rewrote my life. They made sure to keep me grounded after that. No certified combat missions. No promotion to aviator. Just the title and the weight of the story. But I didn't mind. Because stories outlive orders. After the program at Dar Mara gained traction, the military launched similar emergency response training across 3 other bases. Mechanics now learn flight systems alongside torque specs. They're taught to understand the aircraft like living creatures, not just machines. I visit every so often. Give the same talk. Walk the same line. They call it Ember's rule. Now, know enough to act. Care enough to try. I still keep the photo. Folded in half. Edges fraying. My mother's face soft with pride and sun glare. Some nights, I take it out and trace the words in pencil, faded, but still there. For you, Ma, who flew so I could dream. I've added my own line now, scribbled beneath it. We're still dreaming. Still flying. Once, during a quiet evening at the simulator, one of my students asked, "Did you ever want to go back? Fly full-time?" I smiled. "No," I said. "That flight was never just mine. It belonged to everyone who'd ever felt invisible. Everyone who was told they couldn't. I flew so someone else might believe they could." And I meant every word. In the end, I wasn't the best pilot in the air. But I was the one who showed up when no one else could. That's what makes the difference. Not orders. Not medals. But the moment you decide the sky will not be empty today, not on your watch. And when they ask me now what I do, I tell them simply, I fly between the rules. Because sometimes, the spark that refuses to die becomes the flame that saves the world. I was Ember One. And that was enough. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.